Warm welcome to those following us online. October is an exceptional month since it was 17 years ago in October, this date to be exact, that Suzana and Marcelo founded the Conscious Living Spiritist Group. For 17 years, the Conscious Living Spiritist Group has been disseminating Spiritism in Portuguese and English with hopes that more and more hearts become touched, enlightened by the Spiritist message through public presentations and study groups. 17 years does not come easy. There are many challenges, obstacles, and difficulties, yet when we look around today, we know it has all been worth it. All the volunteers here today have assisted in the foundation of this Spiritist Center. Some came and left, others came and stayed, but it does not matter. Everyone's touch, contribution, and energy are present, impregnating these walls with much love and fraternity. We cannot start today's activity without a prayer of profound gratitude to Jesus, Allan Kardec, and the benevolent spirits who are present and look after us in every activity of this blessed center. Master Jesus, mentors of the centers, and all the mentors that watch over us here and for those at home, guide us as we participate in this lecture today. Inspire us with words of wisdom, understanding, and the willingness to see, to feel, and understand these words. Inspire us with questions. Inspire us with wonderful thoughts that help bring this material into our hearts so we may learn from this and take a different path that brings us closer to your light. Amen. Today, we are pleased to share with you a unique program entitled Spiritist Contribution Towards Mental Health. We will hear three 15-minute segments by three very special women who make up our panel this morning. Suzana Simões, one of the founders and directors of Conscious Living, Kirsten Santos, dedicated worker of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, and Andreia Netto, director of Conscious Living. This morning's topics will address the Spiritist contribution to the healing of the past, taking action in the present moment, and leaning on the future. Time permitting, we'll allow some questions towards the ends. I would like to welcome Andreia Netto with the topic Healing the Past.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Well, it's truly a pleasure to be in this Spiritist Center, not for 17 years, but for a few years. How blessed was I to be able to find such a welcoming home where it allowed me in the past to feel embraced, to continue on the Spiritist teachings and learning experience, and also to be able to see how I myself could work on healing the past. This is something that is common to everyone. Pain and suffering is part of our journey. It is part of our spiritual path and growth. And perhaps this is why Jesus, 2,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, was extremely, extremely mindful when addressing the illnesses, the pain, the suffering from others. When he would heal someone, whether it was emotionally or physically, and he would go and he would say, go and don't sin anymore so that the worst doesn't happen to you. And of course, there is a little bit of a stigma, a little bit of an issue with the word sinning. Some of us have come from a background, whether in this life or even previous one, where in the religious sphere or life that we had, we were made to feel ashamed of mistakes. We were made to feel unholy if we sinned. And yet we come to 2023 and sinning has come and taken a whole new meaning, which actually speaks to the immortal spirit, which means to miss the mark. That's what it means. We missed the mark. We were going one way and we deviated, so we missed the mark. And so we started to observe, in light of Spiritism, that making mistakes, a lot of people call failures, really is not. Joanna de Angelis, the spirit author of many of the books channeled by the medium, Divaldo Franco, states that failures don't exist. What we do have are experiences that have brought us to where we are today. Some of the times, the pain that we feel comes with the guilt that really takes hold of our heart and our souls when we consider the path that we have traveled so far. Sometimes this guilt takes form in a way that we don't understand where it comes from. But Spiritism provides us with a knowledge of reincarnation, many lives, many experiences, many different forms, whether in different cultures, countries, races, sects. And so sometimes when we have this pain that we don't really know where it's coming from, Allan Kardec, through his mission, comes with the codification of Spiritism, giving us the knowledge that perhaps if we can't find the answer for something that is killing us little by little, so to speak, we can rest assured perhaps it is in the very archives of our soul, previous existence. A lot of people they go to regression of memory to try and understand why it hurts so much. But then we open the Spirit's book, and we are going to find a really interesting question, 171, in which Allan Kardec asks, on what is the doctrine of reincarnation based? And the Spirits answered, on the justice of God and revelation. So when we look at this and we start learning about reincarnation and the fact that if we should just stop, really stop, and have the courage to look within, to look at ourselves, to study our conduct, our attitudes, our thinking process, our feelings, the way that we react to life, to people, we can really find the solution to our problems. Joanna de Angelis states that when we have the courage to look within, it is talking about an inner impulse that belongs to what she would call a hero, someone who has that courage to really take on hold and battle that which causes so much pain. Allan Kardec states, those who are aware of how imperfect they are derive a consoling hope from the doctrine of reincarnation. Let's stop here for a second, because there's a little bit more. It's 2 lines, but I just want to focus on this. And I'm going to share on a personal note a little bit of the pain that takes hold of me and how Spiritism contributes towards the healing. So I want you guys to stop, and as I contribute and I share a little bit about myself, and I want you to think about something in your own past, because we've all had issues that cause this pain. So as in the infancy, in the childhood phase, a lot of things contributed to the pain that the adult Andreia feels. Teenage years were a little bit hard. Not sure if anybody here had difficulties in their teenage year. I think everybody can raise their hands, right? Mm-hmm. For various reasons, and mistakes were made. And then when we get into the adulthood, sometimes we really are hard on ourselves about our imperfections. How hard can we be on our imperfections? And it causes a lot of pain. It doesn't matter what the imperfections may be. This is something that Spiritism comes and tells us, that we are all equal, that there is no one better than another. It's that consoling aspect. Allan Kardec states, those who are aware of how imperfect they are derive a consoling hope from the doctrine of reincarnation. Why? Because reincarnation is the healing process for our pain, for that which causes pain, the imperfections. Spiritism states that we are really truly unhappy when we deviate or we distance ourselves from the divine laws. And we do that constantly because we are imperfect. We are learning as we go. So we derive at a consoling notion that we, through reincarnation, are able to better ourselves, to perfect ourselves. And a lot of the pain that we feel is the courage of the spirit who requested to be reborn, to be reincarnated, and visit issues that still causes pain even in the beyond. And a lot of what causes pain in the beyond comes from one word. Starts with a G. Guilt. Guilt. And we bring that with us. Guilt causes so much pain, which is different from being able to simply feel remorse. It's different. It's a whole different dynamic. And so he continues. If they truly believe in the justice of God, they is us. If we truly believe in the justice of God, we cannot expect to be equal for our eternity to those who have done better than we are. We can't. We can't expect to be equal to those that we've come to admire. And so when I look at Suzana, and she has qualities that I admire, it took her a road that was unique to her to get there. And thankfully, she reincarnates beside me. So she can actually try to give me that impulse to achieve what she has already achieved. And hopefully she will look at me and feel the same way. And hopefully we can look at each other and say, wow, how beautiful each one's own journey truly is. And so from a personal note, it took a while to get here. It took a while to get here. Spiritism provided me with the consolation of knowing that the imperfections that I really think are so extreme, when I share them with a psychologist or with my husband or with my sister-in-law or with my friend, and they say it's not that bad. It really isn't that bad. When we look at the world that we live in and something causes us distress and pain, when we look around, it shows the stage that we find ourselves in. This is why I am always really inspired in the phrase from Paul of Tarsus, in which he states, and I don't have it here right now, he says, brethren, getting a hold of myself, forgetting what I left behind, I carry on to the future, which is my destiny in Jesus Christ. Basically saying, you know what? I've realized that I've made a lot of mistakes. I realize that I have a lot to work on. Let's remember who Paul is. Saul of Tarsus, the persecutor of Christians. And when he has that vision that actually brought him to his physical blindness on the road of Damascus, and he can see clearly, he changes his life around. Can we imagine what would have been if Paul of Tarsus fell onto the guilt that was so profound that paralyzed him? Can we imagine what it would have been of Mary of Magdalene, the one who was chosen to see Christ the third day when he resurrects? If she felt guilt, realizing the past filled with earthly passions that was bringing her so much pain, but yet both of them had the courage to realize the mistakes that they had made and go forward. And that's the justice of reincarnation. It is a message of love from God in stating, I love you so much. I created you so that you would be happy and wholesome. And for that, as a good father, I will allow as many opportunities as possible, because the love, justice, charity, that we can't yet understand is that which gives us wing to fly, to soar high. And we can only get there through the means of reincarnation. So Joanna de Angelis comes to us in the book A Full Life, and she says, don't be conflicted over past failures. Do not give in to self-punishment when something goes wrong. Whenever you find yourself besieged by sadness, regret, inner upheaval over a failed attempt, elevate your mental state and persist. Get back in the fight with no fear, because you will succeed. The business plan for each one of us here was designed so that we could succeed. The investments that were made on our behalf was done so that we could succeed. And yet, we know that it's not easy. You may be sitting there thinking, or people at home may be watching saying, you know, that sounds really nice and it's very poetic what Joanna de Angelis brings us, but it's not that easy. And I know. We have psychologists and psychiatrists who can help us, assist us by the means of therapy and medication, so that we can think clearly and find the reason for the suffering, the reason for the pain. And Spiritism comes with that consoling message to remind us that we are not the failure that we sometimes believe to be, that we are not as small as we think we are, but rather that we are divine beings created by God, destined to the plenitude that awaits us by the means of reincarnation. And so, on that note, she reminds us that Jesus is seen as the Redeemer, the liberator from guilt, because he is love in action. Go and sin no more, so the worst doesn't come to you. And so she says, real healing will only happen from the inside out, from the core to the transient form. And this is something that we have to remind, or that we should, I don't like to use the word have, that we should remind ourselves. Because she will finalize in stating, you are what you allow yourself to cultivate in your mind. You are what you allow yourself to cultivate in your mind. And that resonates really big with me in my adulthood, in looking back and in feeling back to things that I can't see from previous incarnations, reincarnations. And so she says, since you are what you allow yourself to cultivate in your mind, especially in these terrible days when everything sides with pessimism, with rebellion, with insecurity, elevate your mind and pray. Pray. In this manner, we find the wholesome energy, the wholesome strength that we need in order to be able to carry on. Feeling within, that feeling, that impulse that is going to allow us to have solid steps towards the future, even if we feel pain in the healing process that we cultivate. Through therapy, we will find that the cultivation of it is going to turn into something completely different. I hope this 15 minutes has provided everyone with a little something. And I truly suggest the reading of the book, A Full Life, in order to be able to understand a little bit of this message from Joanna de Angelis, so that we ourselves can have that full life that we really seek. On that note, I thank you, and I'll give back the word to my friend, Brian.
Thank you. When we did this presentation in Portland a little over a month ago, it was a wonderful time doing this stuff, because like it says, having these three very special women up on the stage, all of them with their contributions, everything that they have to say, it's been one of these more memorable times to learn about people that, like as Andreia says, their own past. Everyone has their own road that they've been on, and it's been a wonderful learning experience, learning it there, but also learning it again here today. So with that, all the way from Baltimore, we have Kirsten to come over with about the present struggles. Kirsten.
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to make sure you
Go
all can
ahead.
hear me. I'm good to go? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I still hear the echo, but that's okay. If you guys say the audio is good, then great. As Jesus said, for those who have ears to hear, and I'm definitely hearing. Hope you guys are too. So today we wanted to touch on and approach this discussion a little differently, and wanted to call to mind an experience that happens in the book Action and Reaction. That's part of the Andrea Louise series, psychographed by Chico Xavier. And in the book Action and Reaction, there's a mentor named Silas, or Silas, if you wish, if you want to go the American route. And in one particular instance in the book, Brother Silas, he approaches a group of suffering brothers and sisters to go and talk with them, to uplift them. And much like what we hope to achieve during these next few moments, Silas approaches these brothers and sisters, these fraternal uh, family, friends, those that are in need, and he says to them, and I'm paraphrasing, friends, I join you here today not as someone who has reached perfection, not as someone who is above you by any means, but rather as a brother or sister in Christ, in my case, who's just here sitting beside you, wanting to encourage you and inspire you and tell you that I've been there and then it gets better. And so today we want to approach this discussion in that same humble manner as I think I speak for each of us when I say that none of us have reached perfection or perfected any of these things, but yet we continue to walk through the fire and continue to push through independent of what struggle goes on. And struggle we do, as all of humanity does. And one of the greatest epidemics or pandemics we faced recently, COVID-19, but undershadowed or not thought about a lot is another type of epidemic or pandemic, which is this epidemic of guilt and sickly pride. And a lot of what we're going to be mentioning today is in the works of Joanna DeAngelis. You can read in various different books. I won't be citing them today, but or perhaps I will, depending. But and all of her psychological series, the ones that are in English, they are great books. One of which is called Existential Conflict. She talks a whole lot about. There's a whole chapter on guilt. There's also works by Givaldo Franco by the Spirit, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, called Psychological and Spirit Obsession Disorders, has great insights from a psychological and psychiatric perspective as well, and truly very inspiring. If you ever get the chance to purchase the book, we always recommend it. So there's a true story, and we're going to share the story like you were a friend of ours. True story of of a teenager. One night, goes out with his friends, is having a great time. This is a normal kid. This is a normal teenager, and we say average. Does okay in school, not a bad kid. But that particular night, he decides, he's underage, but he goes out with his friends, and they all go to drink at someone's house, drink alcohol. And at some point during the night, he decides that he's going to go home, gets behind the wheel of his car, and starts driving. Now, he's quite inebriated, although in his mind he was okay to drive. As he begins to drive, he, um, of course, can't make the correct calculations. And, as he's driving and he's swerving, and at one point, he intersects, he runs into another car. He crashes into another car, killing instantly 2 children that were in the back seat of this car that he hit, as well as a mother who was pregnant, probably due within a few months. So she was far along. And the one who was driving this said car that got hit was the husband. He was the only one that survived. And as he recalls his story and recounts it in a book, he tells that in that moment when the car crashed and then he awakens from being knocked out, he immediately is aware that his two children in the back are deceased. And he looks over at his wife and she takes her last breath. And he said, in those moments, which seemed like an eternity, he said he was faced with an inner dilemma. He could see the young teenager as the car had intersected and made him so close. He could see that it was a young kid. In those brief moments, he was able to sort of put the pieces together. This probably was, an accident or whatever it was. He thought to himself, well, I can hate this kid for the rest of my life who just essentially murdered my two children and pregnant wife, or I could do the opposite and forgive him. He chose forgiveness. After this incident, everyone obviously goes to the hospital, gets stabilized. Well, the husband who survived and the young kid who also survived, the 17-year-old drunk driver. You can imagine as the 17-year-old, 16 or 17-year-old, when he became more aware as he came out of his, came back to consciousness, the immense amount of guilt he faced within himself and just by the looks of his family and just the reality. Imagine being a teenager and probably having done this act many times before and not really thought it through. But now you're faced with the most heaviest burden of dealing with the consequences of your own actions. And it wasn't even intentional. And that's a whole other level. He came to learn that this father whom he had taken away, his wife and children, wanted to meet him, wanted to speak with him. And together they formed a bond. And this older gentleman who lost his family decided that he wanted to take this young man under his wing. Since he lost all his children in that one car crash, he looked at this new young kid as sort of an adopted son. Oddly, can you imagine how to perceive someone who took from you the most precious things and now be able to have such a profound perspective and look at them and want to take them under your wing? But he did just that. And they spent, and still do, spend a great deal of their time giving lectures throughout the US about drunk driving. And together, this young teenager, who's obviously much older now, and this other gentleman, obviously he's a little bit older now as well, having shown truly what forgiveness is and what self-forgiveness is, and what can happen when we are able to forgive ourselves and not carry around guilt, but also forgive others. And we know Andreia talked about past lives, things that we have done, carrying it into our present day. And that's one of the epidemics in our world, is this carrying of guilt, often from previous existences, and sometimes from this lifetime. Guilt and sickly pride. Manuel Firmão de Miranda, in the book Psychological and Spirit Obsession Disorders, talks about this and how much it holds us back as well. Now we say sickly pride. It says sickly pride and guilt. And let us not forget it in the gospel according to Spiritism. it alerts us and tells us that one of the things that keeps us furthest from God, one of the things is pride, believing that we might know better. And really, when we think about these things, we never intend to hurt ourselves. We never usually don't intend to hurt ourselves, taking away any pathological issues. But sometimes, out of our own ignorance, we make these decisions, much like the young teenager who got in the car after making some bad decisions and ultimately changed the life of a whole like not just one family, but all the family that's connected to them, all the lives that are connected to them. And this young man could have carried guilt the rest of his life. Let me bring you another example of a young girl about 7 or 8 years old. She's leaving elementary school as she did every day. And outside of her elementary school is like a little gas station that has like they sell candy and soda and all that kinds of stuff that they would at a gas station. And she came from a really poor family, but oftentimes would see a lot of her classmates and people from her school, getting snacks after school. And one day she was really hungry. She looked around. The store seemed pretty busy. The store owner was busy and ringing up customers. And she briefly took a 10-cent candy and stuffed it in her pocket and walked out of the store. And of course, ate it. And soon thereafter, felt immense guilt. And that little girl is me. And we recall this 40 some odd years later. And what's interesting about the human mind and our ability to hold on to guilt is how we can get triggered by it. What do I mean by that? Every time we go back to our hometown and we pass that little elementary school and we pass that small little gas station that's still in existence, it's that pang of guilt that hits us over 10-cent candy. Now, when we apply that to things of a greater scale, it happens, the mechanism is the same. Certain things in our lives trigger us, triggers the guilt, and then we feel really bad. And sometimes we feel pride. We don't want to admit that we were wrong. And herein is where one of our greatest struggles can be. It's not only the guilt, but our inability to let go of our pride, to let go and release and have faith in something beyond us, and to believe that we even deserve that. It is a hard feat, but it's not impossible. Shame is something that has been studied in the last decade or so more intently and more specifically by the social worker who has her PhD in social work, and she's most famous. Some of you might know her, Dr. Brené Brown, and her work. Some of her famous books, The Gifts of Imperfection, Dare to Lead, and a slew of many other wonderful books she's put out there based on some of the research that she did. And one of those things, especially in the book, The Gifts of Imperfection, she talks about guilt, but she also talks about courage and being able to face that which scares us the most. And that is what it is, friends. Spiritism teaches us in the Gospel according to Spiritism obedience and resignation. Now, for those of us those of you or anyone who came from a religious background, either growing up in the church or some other religion, belief system other than Spiritism, might view the words, obedience and resignation as not so welcoming and inviting. But if we can for a moment put aside or set aside the judgments of those words and let us contemplate a little bit about something. And let me do that by illustrating a very, very, very brief story. A friend of ours who had been diagnosed with stage 2 or 3 breast cancer and is in remission now and is doing okay. One of the times we encountered each other at the Spiritist Center, and we both had been going through different things. And one of the things that was so amazing that she shared with us is that she found so much peace in just accepting her situation. Granted, she was doing everything in the beginning, of the entire her entire existence of since she had been diagnosed, to make sure to follow the directions of her physicians and specialists. But she said, Kirsten, in the beginning, I was very angry. I was angry at God. I was rebellious about what was happening to me. Why me? And it's a common question. And it's not wrong for us to ask this, but asking the question, why me? But she said she came to a point of just acceptance. Why not me? Why not me? Who knows why this is happening? And she said, Kirsten, the moment in which I said to myself, why not me? Let me see what I can learn. Let me just accept and trust that God knows better. And this truly is an inner movement. This is not just lip service. When you're truly able to make that movement with inside of yourself and make that shift, it is a deep sense of peace that comes over you. Doesn't mean that things get easier and that everything's going to be, a bed of roses. But when we're not fighting when we're not pushing against a wall, and instead trying to learn and go with it, we suffer less. Instead of running from the pain, learning to embrace it, learning to look at ourselves, even if we feel that shame that comes along with guilt, that shame that can come along with our own imperfections, especially for those of us coming from a Judeo-Christian background, there are often times when it comes to illness or sickness, there's that guilt associated with, oh, I've done something wrong, and then you feel this immense shame. When instead of sitting in that shame and being angry and rebellious, looking at this as an experience to not be afraid of, but to walk through. Truly, our perspectives are our realities. How we perceive something to be. Often, Joanna DeAngelis says, our issues truly sometimes can be a matter of fixation. We get fixated on an idea, and that's our truth, and that's our reality. When we need to open up our mind, and she says that in the book Happy Life, keep an open mind. Allow yourself to bend instead of breaking. This is truly lessons for a lifetime for us to embrace and implement. And most importantly, always going back to the basics or the core of who and what we are, which is a child of God. We are spiritual beings having this human experience. And the more we fight against something, the more difficult it is. But the more we release, let go, resign ourselves to experience and learn from what we're going through, and be obedient and believe that there is a higher power, that there is a purpose and a design behind why we endure what we endure. I'm just going to check my time real quick. Okay. But friends, if we can share anything, it would be this. Am I good with time, Brian? Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I just had to unmute myself here. You're a little bit over time, but that's okay.
But that's it. I just wanted to share those thoughts.
But we'll, all right. So we'll continue on with this. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you for coming so far from Baltimore to share those wonderful words. I'm actually trying to stop myself from going down my own little guilt shame trip that I had, and also reflecting on, oddly enough, it was like, as she's mentioning some of these things, it was one of the ones that hit me was, like I said, former military, but spirits, thank God, got me out of the military. They stopped me from going down apparently a path I've gone before. But I used my experience from that to be there for others that stayed in. And like I joined back in 2000. So I mean, I literally came out of boot camp a month ahead of 9/11. So a lot of my friends went over to Afghanistan and Iraq. And afterwards, I was hearing some of their stories, some of their things that went through. And one of them, I'm not going to get into too many details, but he was telling me he was there in Iraq in a battle that lasted 3 days. 3 days. No time to eat, no time to sleep, nothing. Just constant fighting 3 days. And during this time frame, around that time frame, eventually, with all that stress, his mind essentially snapped, and the only thing he could do was start laughing, just to relieve the stress. He was under so much for 3 days. He started laughing, but he's still in combat. He's still fighting. So, and it broke his spirit because here he is. He's having to shoot at people, but he's laughing. He thought he'd become the Joker from the comic book series, and he was just laughing and he was just, but that was the only way he could relieve stress. It broke him, and he's no longer with us today because of the guilt and that shame. But hopefully there's hope in the future. I'm sorry to lay this one heavy on you, Suzanne, but you're a founding member of this place. You're the powerhouse behind this. So help us have the future and the hope, and guide us home.
All right, so thank you everyone. Thank you, Andreia. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Brian. One of the things that I have enjoyed the most so far is just how real this is, how real this feels, how safe this place has become for us to come to be ourselves, our true selves, and in that space of safety and honoring our humanity, there is always hope, and there's always the best environment for healing. Because one of the most powerful things when it comes to healing and mental health is to find a safe place where we can share our stories. So I heard Andreia's story, Kirsten's story, Brian's stories, and this place is and will always be a place where we can share our stories. I'm very proud of the center for being the space that has become fulfilling its mission to be a place, a warm place where anyone and everyone, no matter who you are, is absolutely welcome and embraced. And when we think of mental health, right? So we're not only talking about the soldiers, we're not only talking about people who are institutionalized or people who have been deemed, insane and who are out there in our communities hurting others with psychotic breakdowns, as we unfortunately get to see constantly in our news and in our society, because it seems like it's a topic that belongs to someone else. So I want to start by emphasizing that it belongs to me. It belongs to me. It belongs to you. It belongs absolutely to all of us, since we live in a society that is profoundly disconnected from what is essential, and we dwell with our unhealthy thinking and quite often a very unhealthy mindset uh, as we go through our day to days. So, Spiritism has a very significant contribution to mental health. Andreia have spoken about the past and the need to reconcile with the past, to forgive ourselves. Kirsten has touched about the present and how Spiritism is able to empower us by talking about our journey, our immortality, and how to better again reconcile with guilt, with shame, and to connect with our sense of divinity. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the future. I think that Spiritism provides us with an incredible contribution when it talks about the future. And it's a future that is concrete and that has been connected to a higher purpose. So, a lot of the challenges that we face nowadays in mental health, let's take anxiety as one of them. We live in a very anxious world, right? Has to do with this disconnection with any sense of future. We do have religions who are immortalists, who believe in the continuity of life, that life is not just the physical body. And yet, the presentation, the understanding of the future is so vague that it gives rise for a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety. Not only it is vague, but sometimes is very full of ideas. They're not necessarily the most consoling and comforting, such as the ideas of hell and so forth. So in Spiritism, it gives us this concrete idea of the future, which will broaden for all of us the concept of life. We are now certainty that there is only life in the universe. We are either alive inside the physical body or outside of the physical body. It grants us the sense of continuity and actually links. Everything is linked. So our past, our present, our future, those are all stations or seasons, if you will, of a journey that is always worthwhile undertaking. And that is something that is very powerful about Spiritism. With the idea of the future, there is another idea that is very, very consoling, which is the idea of progress. We are progressing. We are moving forward. So with that, we know that tomorrow will be better than today. As we know that today we have here with us our very best version, our best version ever. Maybe if we are today in a very dark place, in a place of a lot of pain, if we are aching, it might be difficult to connect with this idea. This is my very best version. But Spiritism tells us that everything will pass. We are moving. We are moving forward. So better days will come, and even the challenges, even the difficulties, the struggles that you are facing today, everything, as Andrea mentioned, is part of a higher and perfect plan. There is a perfect plan for each one of us. And this perfect plan is taking us to a better mental and spiritual, emotional place, a place of harmony, a place of centeredness and peace. When we have this vision of life as this succession of times and seasons, we also understand that whatever it is that we experience today does not define who we are, but rather where we are. And that makes a huge difference, because shame comes from a place, as Kirsten was saying, of not only you realize that you have missed the aim, but you feel yourself to be a mistake, an error in essence. So when we understand what life is truly about, and we understand where we are heading, and we understand that this is just a momentary situation, then it is about where we are and not about who we are. And what the future holds for us is this place that Jesus promised us, which is the kingdom of heaven. So the kingdom of heaven is what we are building each day. And again, everything that comes in our lives, the challenges, the difficulties, the people, the circumstances, those are stepping stones. Stepping stones, they're taking us to and towards this better place that we will all experience, again, of connection, of centeredness, of peace, which Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. We will not go there, we will not reach this state alone. And that is something so important when it comes to the issue of mental health. None of us can make it alone. All of us will need at one point or another the help of others. So having the awareness and the humbleness to understand that actually God is so merciful, putting us in society, so that we can reach out to one another and say, hey, today I need help. Give me a hand here. So we have the help of others, but we also have the help of the higher power of God, who is with us on the road, helping us, guiding us towards the laws, perfect laws of justice, laws of love, who are always pushing and pulling us to the straight path. Because a healthy mind is a mind that is either in connection with the law of love or seeking to connect with the law of love. So when it comes to actions that we can take to reach a better state of mental health, one of them is to know. So the Spiritist Center, Conscious Living, many other Spiritist centers provide us with the means to study, with the means to understand. The more we understand life's purpose, the more we understand and embrace the concept of the future and everything that it entails, the happiness that awaits for us, the healing that is on its way, the progress, the easier it becomes for us to, in the midst of all the troubles and difficulties, to feel supported and to be soothed in our troubles and in our challenges. Now, once we know the future, once we know it, not only with our minds, with our cognition, but also with our hearts and soul, then this knowing grants us something very important, which is hope. It's hard to endure life's trials when we don't have hope in our hearts. So the Spiritist message, fuel our hearts with hope. And hope is the fuel for resilience. And the Spirit Emmanuel will tell us that hope is the moonlight of our darkest nights. So perhaps you are today in a very dark place, the darkest of all the nights. But if you can tap into hope, you will have a ray of light in the middle of your dark night, illuminating your soul path and give you the vision of the future and a place to arrive. Knowing the future will give us hope, not only for tomorrow, but give hope in ourselves and give hope also in humanity. Of course, this is not going to be a straight path. So it's also important that we understand when it comes to mental health, there will be better days than others. There will be days that will be more centered and connected. There will be days that will be lost and disconnected. Days of more joy, days of more sadness. And actually understanding that also brings us consolation and help us to do what Kirsten was saying, not to fight, but to flow, but to go along. It is that way because we are still, again, far from really understanding emotionally and psychically the essence of our lives and the fact that God loves us so much, that we are so loved at all times, that no matter where we are, we will always belong because we belong to something that is very divine, and divinity is also our essence. Those are beautiful, poetic words, but words that we struggle to really internalize and really identify with. Paul of Tarsus was very aware of our human frailty, and he, in writing to Ephesians, he recommended what I would suggest to be the second action. After studying and dedicating ourselves to knowing Spiritism a little better, is to take upon the armor of God. And so he writes to Ephesians by saying, therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all of this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. I wish, this paragraph is the source of a great lecture. We could go in details about each one of these pieces of the armor of God. But the armor of God is meant to help us to stand our ground, to stand firm, to give us the resilience. And the evil that he talks about here has been interpreted over time as something that is outside of us. And today we know that our biggest enemy lives within ourselves. Is that place of fear, is that place of disconnection, is that place of darkness that is screaming for care, for love, for compassion, for forgiveness, for acceptance. So let's talk very quickly about two pieces of the armor that I think are very important when it comes to mental health. One of them is the helmet of salvation, because it starts with the protection of the mind. The mind, our minds is everything. Our mind is the source of our thoughts, the source of our creations, and also the source of our connections. Our connections start by what we are thinking, and with our thoughts, embedded in our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. So Spiritism will teach us about how we can proper take care of our minds. Think about the time that we spend taking care of our homes, taking care of our physical bodies. We bathe, we brush our teeth daily, hopefully, right? We groom ourselves. How much time and how much effort are we putting into taking care of our psychic home, our thoughts? So meditating, prayer, as was mentioned here before, studying, feeding, nurturing our minds with altruistic thoughts can be a powerful way to get started and to protect ourselves as we are on the way. And the second piece of the armor that I would like to mention is the shield of faith. Because if hope is the moonlight, faith is the light of the sun. So The brighter the sun shines, the brighter is the light of the sun. Also, the brighter will be the light of the moon. Those two things are connected. The shield of faith protects us from our own vulnerabilities, protect us from our own frailty. Because when our minds can no longer reach the understanding of the circumstances or the understanding of the universe, faith comes in place. Faith is that place where we surrender in the recognition that there is something much higher than us. It is that moment where, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the pain, when the soul feels absolutely lost, it looks up to the sky, it looks outwards or inwards to the perfection of our physical body. It looks at the universe and understands that everything is in place. It's a deep feeling of connection. Faith restores the connection. Faith is that moment where we give up in understanding with our brains to understand with our entire beings. We surrender to God and we say, I'm not alone. I am not lost. I belong. And there is this higher source who is in control of everything. So as we celebrate 17 years of conscious living, this is what we are here to do. This is what we are here to offer each and every day. A conscious living. Because as painful it is to be conscious of our humanity, darkness, and vulnerabilities, it is even more painful to walk in darkness, not knowing about all these forces and all these vulnerabilities that on a daily basis are influencing us and affecting the way we see life and our mental health. So it is with gratitude in our hearts to God, to Jesus, to our mentors and benefactors, and to each one of you that we are here today. Very, very grateful and proud to actually be doing and disseminating Spiritism in English. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. As one of our friends from the mediumistic group, a spirit who presented itself some weeks ago, he asked us to talk about Jesus and talk about how Jesus is the doctor, he is the physician, he is the psychotherapist that can help us all to come to this place of peace and harmony. So gratitude to the Lord, to God, and again, to each one of you. It makes a huge difference to have friends along the way. So don't think that you are coming here just to receive. You are giving us, each one of us, as much as we are giving to you. So for your presence, for your love, for being here today, or for listening to us online, thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzana. So I was going to open the floor up for those of us here, as well as those of us online. If you would like to pose a question to any of the three speakers we've had today, please post it now. Or I was going to say, if there's any. And while forever hold your peace, yeah, famous those words. While people are posting online, if any questions, I just wanted to remind everyone that after today's lecture, we are going to celebrate the 17 years at the Miami Shores Country Club, located at 2000 Biscayne Boulevard, Miami Shores, Florida. Come celebrate with us. Bring your own wallet. And also, are we still gonna do?
Yes.
Okay. Prayer before or after?
We can do a small prayer before and then a big prayer. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And thank Kirsten so we can end.
All right, thank you, thank you. At this moment, we are going to go. Bye, Kirsten. We love you. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. So we are going to the second part of our meeting today, which is our passage. So at this time, let me see if I can get the music.
Pandora is off.
Hmm?
Pandora is off.
And there it's
It's on the background.
It's on the background. I got